You have 1 year left to live. How would you live it? We want to live it by pursuing this bucket list. That went super viral. The first day we had 1 million views. By the end of it, we had over 200 million.
Depending on time we discuss, I have Dillon Hill with me. Dillon, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Dillon, you are the founder of Cosmoforge. It is a marketing growth agency. I can only speculate what that is. So, let's just take a second, set the groundwork. What is Cosmoforge? What is a marketing growth agency?
Yeah, I mean, it can mean a lot of things. Growth kind of means that we're not just helping with the marketing perspective, but we're factoring in everything that comes after that. So most often that's sales, but we can also think about how can we improve the marketing process to make the operations part easier. So growing your business is not just marketing, it's everything else. And so we're certainly experts in marketing, but we think about all that other stuff and try to integrate it together.
Now, invariably having a podcast and having a YouTube channel and having a presence on social media, I invariably get hit with like, oh, I can grow your channel, 3,000% or whatever it is. I'm assuming that you're not part of those people, but I'm assuming that probably social media plays a role. What kinds of avenues do you pursue to try to help people grow their business? What's that like for you?
Our most common client, the one that we're focused on mainly, is companies with high lead values, which is still a pretty broad topic. But that's things like contractors, right? So if they install roofing, for example, every lead they get is worth a lot of money. But it can also mean something like a freight company. We have a client that creates custom vans for like hashtag van life type stuff. Um, and often it's B2B. And so social media isn't super common, but it does come up, right? So basically what we do, and it's helpful because of my background with an MBA, is break it down to the fundamentals, right? So you might look at a roofing company and a van company and say, well, they're completely different. They have completely different strategies. But when you really break it down, when you think about what happens after marketing, you think about what it costs to acquire a customer, how many times they come back, what the value is there, and just really fundamental, how much does an interaction with one person generate our company? And then from there, you figure out, okay, well, what are those people looking for, right? If they're a van company, they're looking for the ability to get out into the wilderness. If you're a roofing company, you're looking for safety, security, and no leaky roof, right? And then you figure out what's the best way for them to find that message. Okay, if they're looking for to not have a leaky roof, you would imagine that's a pretty urgent situation. Something like Google Ads makes a lot more sense because the value that you provide is best communicated through an urgent channel. Google Ads is an example of that. So social media definitely comes up, right? If we're talking about van life, I mentioned hashtag van life, right? So they're looking for the value of that company on social media. But it's different every time, right? And there's times where people, they see those channels that you're talking about, how to grow your business, go on Instagram. It's like, well, we have a client that's a freight company and that's a waste of time, right? Because the value that they provide is highly efficient logistics services. No one's looking for similar value propositions on Instagram. So it comes up, but it's not frequent. And really, it just depends on the fundamentals of the business. The fundamentals being sort of the financial side and the value proposition for their customer. How do those come together into the most logical channels? And the channels that are most operationally viable, right? So we don't want to ask a business owner to post on social media every day or to pay someone to post on social media every day. They just don't have the content for that.
Let's talk, specifically marketing growth. This is the crux of your business. Why marketing growth? What happened that you got this idea and you're like, this is for me. This is what I want to do.
There's kind of two different big stories. The first one I think is a little bit more common. My family, we grew up very poor. It wasn't until I was about a year old that my family moved out of living in a vehicle into an apartment. I now live very comfortably. Like my family is middle class, and that happened because my dad built a business, right? So I know what it means to be an entrepreneur, and that's something that's deeply important to me. It fits into just the way my brain works. I want to improve things. And so I've always been looking for opportunities to do that. And that kind of ties into the second story. So in high school was sort of the beginning. I created a 501c3 nonprofit that helps kids in the hospital for a lot of different reasons. The short and the gist of it is everyone's trying to get into a good college at that age. It was a little bit selfish. But when you are doing that and you go to volunteer opportunities, it's all very generic, right? It's all very like, you don't really get to help people. You fill out paperwork, you do the grunt work because you're 16, 17. They're not going to let you help someone in the hospital, right? There's a lot of liability involved there. So I said, okay, fine. You know, I saw what happened when my dad took his own route. I'm going to take my own route. I'm going to start my own organization. And I could tell, you know, dozens of different stories there, but it really opened my eyes to, wow, I kind of have a knack for connecting the dots, right? And when you're building something from scratch, you got to worry about the operations. You got to serve the people you're claiming you're serving, but you also got to have enough money to do that and everything in between. Um, and so, yeah, that worked out really well. And then ultimately, I kept working on that. As 17-year-olds, we raised $200,000 and we helped children's hospitals across the country. Beyond rewarding. And then a few years later, that was still kicking. I got into a college. I was going to college. My childhood best friend at that point called me. He said, "I've been diagnosed with terminal cancer." And a lot of stuff went through my mind. But really the main takeaway for me was we ended the call and I had my econ homework and my lecture out in front of me. And I'm kind of a natural doer, so I started to work on it. And then 5 minutes later, I'm like, what is going on here? Why did I immediately turn the situation with my friend into getting back into school? Like that's just not how I should be responding to this. He has a year to live, right? So I'm not going to spend that hanging out with him once a week and then all the other time in school. So I made the decision to drop out of college, and together we started a foundation. We created a documentary series, and the angle was basically, if you have 1 year left to live, how would you live it? And we want to live it by pursuing this bucket list. That went super viral. The first day we had 1 million views. By the end of it, we had over 200 million. And that, tying back into growth, after my little rant there, tying it back into growth, I knew how to make videos. That's marketing adjacent. Okay, we got some attention. Very grateful for it. But when you're managing the response of 200 million people who want to make your bucket list possible, you have to think about what comes next, right? It's not just about the views. It's about, this is my friend's life, and I need to make sure every single opportunity from a marketing perspective is made possible, right? If we get those views and 10% of those people reach out and say, I know someone who can help with your dream of going in a helicopter, I have to respond to those emails and I have to do so efficiently. And we have to plan where we're going to go, when we're going to be there, who's going to help. And so I guess that really opened my eyes to, number one, I'm capable, which, you know, was very rewarding. I felt very good about that. Number two was how to handle what happens after marketing. And that's the sort of emphasis on growth. And then the next level of that, we actually, one of our bucket list dreams, number 4, was to break a world record. We set out to break the world record for the most bone marrow donor signups. He had leukemia, so he was looking for that 0.006% genetic match. We broke the world record. 13,000 people signed up. And then one of those people, one of those 13,000 people, they were actually that perfect genetic match. They were the one my friend needed to get a bone marrow transplant, and it literally saved his life. And that is like marketing. I mean, in hindsight, it's marketing taken to the extreme. At the moment, it was just blown away, extremely grateful, really caught up in the moment. But after that sort of rounded out, he had a successful treatment. He's still in remission. We started helping other people. And then I was like, okay, I really have a knack for this. Try to help people as much as possible, but that's sort of my hobby now. And then now it's just basically, okay, I saw what can happen if we do really good marketing with really good what happens next in place. It can literally save someone's life. And that's not going to happen for a van company or a freight company. But it's still just as important because all the people we work with, they're entrepreneurs and they're doing this for their family, just like my dad did when he built his business. It was a wild ride. I'm still working on the best way to compress that story into something concise. But it all feels very important and very personal to me, as to why I'm here.
Dylan, that is one heck of a story. I mean, beginning at the very beginning, living out of a vehicle, and then growing up and starting a 501(c) when you're in high school, and then
Thank you.
going to college, and your friend has this tragedy, and then you drop out, and then you create this viral sensation, and then you go on and you create your business. I mean, it's just like it's just, you're just pounding life. You're like giving it one punch after another. I
Yeah,
love
it's a
that. That
weird
is,
adventure. They really put stuff into perspective. I was very grateful to have experienced a lot of that at a young age. And, when I get stressed, being an entrepreneur is stressful. And sometimes you just got to remember this stuff is important, right? These clients depend on us. But at the same time, if we make a typo in an email, it's not the end of the world, right? There's more important things that are happening here. Let's align with that and, kind of stay trucking.
I want to talk about you dropping out of college. So it's very similar to when people switch from working their job to being an entrepreneur. Like, invariably, you have to walk away from your job to be an entrepreneur if you want that your business to be successful. So I think there's kind of some parallels there with you leaving college, where normally you might have the conversation with your partner about switching jobs, but with college, I feel like that conversation is with your parents. And if they are kind of bankrolling your college experience, which they may have been, they may have not been, but what was that conversation like when you told them, I'm leaving school because of my friend? I'm sure they understood to a point, but they also couldn't help but think about the financial part of that as well. So what
Yeah.
was that conversation like?
Complicated in a lot of different ways, right? On one end, so that charity I started in high school, this friend who I ultimately dropped out for, he was originally diagnosed when we were about 10, 11, 12. And when that happened, every time I would visit him, I would bring video games. And so the idea of helping kids in the hospital through video games inspired the nonprofit. It was inspired by him and my experience with him. And so, there and my parents are huge, not so much anymore, but at the time were not very video game friendly. They're kind of the older generation. They work their butts off as entrepreneurs. Video games are a problem. Um, and they were like, "What? You want to start a nonprofit with video games? What are you talking about?" And then we raised $200,000. They attended a visit and they saw what happened. And they saw, okay, he was inspired by his friend. It led to this. It built me some rapport, I guess. So when I came around the next time and I said, "Hey, his cancer's back. I'm done with college," they understood that something was happening, but obviously the risk here was much higher, right? And because they had came from nothing, the idea of college was such like a privilege to them, right? So that's where the tension came from was, what are you talking about? We've worked so hard to give you an easy path from A to B. Just get the degree, make money, and you're fine. You don't have to grind it out. That was very confusing for them. They understood it. They believed in me, but in a lot of ways, it's a bad decision, right? It's not dropping out of Harvard to because you have 10,000 users using your Facebook.com app, right? It's like, I want to make a nonprofit to help my friend. But that changed very quickly, right? Like I said, 1 million views in a day. Okay, that really puts it into perspective. They did ask of me something that I'm still kind of conflicted on to this day. In hindsight, I'm very glad it happened, but in the moment, it was very overwhelming. They said, "We're going to support you in this decision, but if you're not going to school because that is so important to us, we're going to ask that you pay rent." And so what was happening, which is totally reasonable, I don't have to pay for food or health insurance or any of the other things, just rent, right? And it was like half the market rate. Um, but what that meant is I had to make some of my own money. So I actually started doing a lot of this marketing stuff on the side as we were running the foundation. And so, yeah, very conflicted. They asked for that, but it was sort of the inkling of where I am now, where I started to do sort of reproduce what I was doing with my friend for other companies, small little clients to make that rent every month. And then coming out of it, it gave me a lot of confidence to continue doing that outside of the world of nonprofits, because that's a real perspective too, right? Like, I had only experience with nonprofits, and as a young person, which is kind of a 2-for-1 marketing angle, it's like the 17-year-old kids helping kids in the hospital. Of course, you're going to pay attention to that. So my sort of insecurity was, can I produce similar results for things that are a little bit less like newsworthy or interesting and more generic? And they, in a way, sort of forced me to start experimenting with that and gave me a lot of confidence.
Let's hang on your agency at the moment. What is a typical day like, or like looking back at this past week?
Yeah, I mean, right now, of course, it's always client growth, right? So meeting with prospective clients. The challenging part is because we do consider so much more than just one marketing channel, we have to think about their entire business. And so there's a lot of meetings that end up with drawing a lot of diagrams and trying to figure out how A leads to B and B leads to C. And that college degree I actually left was in cognitive computer science. So my background's in computer science, and then I have sort of this boots on the ground experience with marketing. So a lot of what we do is automation based, because we're working with people who can benefit from having someone focus on their marketing strategy, but they're not really in a point to be able to hire or manage a full-time marketing person. So it's sort of that place we sit in is all about automating as much as we can for them. And so there's a lot of computer science type work, a lot of been playing around with ChatGPT API for some clients, things like that. Beyond that, we're kind of at the point now. So it's myself, and then I actually am hiring a classmate of mine that I met through my MBA program, and we're kind of reaching our capacity now. So there's a lot of questions of what do we want our future to look like, right? That first like full-time hire would be the third person. Well, that's a big, really, really big step. And we want to make sure that the systems are in place for them.
Early in 2024, I spoke with a guy, Kyle, I believe was his name, and he had his own company called Little Guy AI. And the premise of the company was that kind of like what you said, actually, that people don't necessarily have the resources to hire a dedicated marketing person to do the marketing for them. So what he was doing was teaching people essentially how to use ChatGPT and similar AI platforms to kind of do some of the monotonous work as far as the email writing or copywriting, using it as a tool and then refining it in your own voice or whatever. And you kind of mentioned this before. How much of that are you leveraging? Are you using that a lot, a little bit? What's that like?
In my day-to-day, I use it quite a bit. It's very helpful for coding, and it's very helpful for like compressing notes. It's very helpful for generating copy once you develop a value proposition with the client. We use the back end a little bit. We do have the situation though where clients are very excited about it. They might use it for some creative tasks. And it's actually very limited in its technical tasks. So we have a client right now who wants to take a transcript of a call that they have with the prospect and then automatically put that, whatever is said in that conversation, digest it and put it into sort of a log of form fields inside of their CRM, their customer relationship manager. They want to, so for example, if you have a conversation and we say, okay, what address are you looking to ship your product to? Download that transcript, send it in ChatGPT, and then update a form field like you would a spreadsheet cell based on that information. ChatGPT is not great at that. So it's a surprising balance of saying like, look, there's other solutions for that. We understand what you're trying to do. ChatGPT just is probably not the best bet for that. So yeah, it started off a lot of, yeah, let's do it. Let's make it happen. This thing's amazing. But as it's been around a little bit longer, there's a lot of limitations. So we've actually been pumping the brakes a lot more than I would have expected 12 months ago.
One of the things I'd like to talk about too is people transitioning careers. It's one thing if you're starting out your career and you want to do something like what you're doing, and it's easy to say, okay, well, maybe I should get into pursue my MBA or supply chain management or something like that. But I like to talk about what happens to those people that are in the middle of their career and they're looking to change. So you went to school, you said, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's kind of a derivative of computer science. So if someone is looking to do what you're doing, they want to start their own company that has to do with market growth. What are some avenues of education that they would find helpful that you've discovered?
I am less concerned in my experience of the channels, the tools that are used for the education, and more so the purpose. I think one of the most important things in my life I've done is given myself a playground to learn, and that's the nonprofit and the foundation, right? That is a reason to make Google searches rather than necessarily what you search on Google or what YouTube videos you watch. I would highly recommend, and this is something that we are planning for onboarding, is working with an existing nonprofit, or it doesn't need to be a formal nonprofit, but think about something that you're passionate about And if it's helping other people, it's probably a little bit easier than your hobby, but even your hobby. And even if you don't want to turn that hobby into a business, imagine you are. Say you paint Warhammer figurines. I saw that on TikTok recently, right? Say that's your thing. And you love doing it. It's just sort of a way to relax, unwind over the weekend. But you want to pivot careers. That's unrelated. Just put yourself in the situation. Let's pretend I was going to sell these Warhammer figures. What would I have to do? Right? Who am I selling to? Why am I selling it to them? How do I ship it to them? All these different things that start coming up when you think about providing a service. I think that gives you a framework for learning, and you'll figure out the channels that work for you. Personally, I like to read like blogs more than I like to watch videos, and I'll just Google problems as they come up. You might find structured courses better for you. But I think the ability to sort of solve problems and see how the dots are connected, sort of that entrepreneurial mindset, the people I've seen transition careers are more successful when they build that muscle rather than when they learn something specific. So that would be my recommendation. I think that's why I've been able to see success, is because you always just look for like, what's next? What's the next problem? How do I improve this process from where it is to where it needs to go?
All right, that's good information. And then lastly, Dillon, whenever I'm speaking with someone, I like to give them the opportunity to talk about a project they're working on, a cause they believe in, their business. You have so many things to choose from. But I'm going to hand the floor over to you. If there's something you'd like to talk about, the floor is yours.
Yeah, sure. Okay, the first quick one, a friend of mine in 21, she was a victim of domestic violence. So we've been hosting an annual scholarship in her honor. If you look up Sahara Hope Scholarship, there's information about that. Whether you are someone who experienced domestic violence, you can apply for that scholarship. It's a very simple application process, or if anyone was interested in making a donation, would be appreciated. But beyond that, part of the onboarding process that I'm doing with my classmate who is being onboarded now, and then certainly in future hires, is we want to give them the opportunity to be the chief marketing officer for nonprofits as a free service, so that they can get a handle on how we provide services to our clients in that safe playground that I was just talking about. So if anyone out there has a nonprofit or their favorite nonprofit or anything like that, that you think you could use help with growing, we'd be happy to help. It's sort of a training exercise that we provide for free. Of course, not the full service chief marketing officer, but we'll help you decide on a channel that makes the most sense and get you set up for success there and try to help you out. Yeah, and if anyone just has questions, of course, they can reach out.
That is awesome information. I love that. I was actually just editing episode 55 a few days ago. And for those keeping score, by the time this goes live, this will be around well past episode 82. So I have quite a few episodes I need to go through. But this particular episode was with Ginger from Pinstripe Marketing. And she was talking about how her agency also does something similar with nonprofits to help them out. So I love that. Nonprofits they're such a good cause. They help the communities out. They help so many people. That's awesome. So I love hearing about things like that. Dillon, it's been absolutely awesome having you on Time We Discuss, and we learned what it's like to be the founder of a marketing growth agency and all the other amazing things you've done. It's been absolutely awesome. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much.